Hi, I'm Micah Frankel, and welcome to Caged Minds Uncensored. A shout out to Edmund Ruiz and Mac 10, that's MMACK10. Check them out on Facebook. Support the I Got Your Back anti-bullying campaign. I've talked to Edmund before, know a lot of the guys that he supports. He supports combat sports, athletes everywhere. So, like I said, check out Mac 10 on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in to listen. It was an end still kind of weekend. First off, though, a congratulations to Jordan Espinosa, Alliance MMA, at the Arnold Sports Festival. Jordan picks up a split decision win over CJ Hamilton. That's two in a row, two huge ones in a row over Hamilton and Nick Urso, guys that were in the Access TV rankings, and that matters because that's the way you get up to that next level, to the UFC. A big win in the Contender Series, and then at this Arnold Sports Festival. Also, first round knockout artist Devontae Smith took out UFC vet Justin Edwards. But like I said, it was also an end still kind of weekend. The world of boxing saw heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder reach the mark of 40-0, and I mean, that is just incredible to me. 40-0. Stylistically, he may not look the prettiest with his big windmill kind of shots, but doing and getting to 40-0, having faced adversity, the adversity of a Luis Ortiz, who was the tighter, more technical fighter, and from what I saw throughout social media, was ahead on the scorecards going into that 10th round when Wilder is able to start landing that right hand, get two knockdowns, the referee stops the fight, and still champion. Hopefully we can see that Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua fight while Wilder is still somewhat in his prime, and that Joshua, let's hope that boxing, the politics aren't taking too much of a claim. It's kind of sad for the people that are still dethroning and downplaying the greatness of a Deontay Wilder. We've wanted to see a great heavyweight for a long time again, an American heavyweight in the boxing ring, and 40-0, the WBC champion. Congratulations to the Bronze Bomber. Keep doing your thing. We had another big weekend of MMA, 3 events I wanted to talk about. Also, there was Glory Kickboxing. You can get the results up at cageminds.com, and Badahari did take the unanimous decision win over your Hesty Gerges. Love me some Glory Kickboxing. But here on a quick show this week, we're just going to be talking about some MMA. And still, but needing a little new change, LFA 34, Robert Watley relies on his wrestling due to having his contacts knocked out early, is able to get the unanimous decision win pretty decisively. We're talking about 48-46 on one scorecard, but 49-45 on 2. A deduction was taken from Robert Watley when he threw a knee that did land to the head of Brandon Jenkins, but should have led to the finish of the fight because Jenkins was on 2 feet and just with his butt off the ground as he was starting to stand up, popping up from the squatting position. The knee should have been counted as legal. An unfair point deduction for Robert Watley. Thankfully, the point deduction was not detrimental, and Watley was able to get the decision victory. The lack of vision obviously greatly affected Watley, and thankfully didn't cost him the title. Hopefully he'll be able to get the LASIK vision correction surgery he so desires. Watley himself has said that he signed a new 2-fight deal with the LFA and is not in a hurry to jump into the UFC, even though I still believe he's the top lightweight outside of the octagon at this time. The co-main event in that lightweight division, Trey Ogden got busted up a little bit but was able to secure his takedowns, and in the 3rd round, 20 seconds in, hops on a guillotine, rolls through, gets to the mount, and gets the submission victory. A pair of Rufus Sport fight featherweights get submission victories. We're talking about Jordan Griffin, after being dominated pretty much on the ground for a good 8 minutes by Derek Minner. They're fighting in a double calf slicer position. You can see the highlight up at Caged Minds MMA on our Instagram. and Griffin reaches for an armbar when his corner's calling that it's there because Minner's trying to release the arms from the foot, and the submission savvy grappling vet gets submitted by a striker, Jordan Griffin. That was quite impressive. I heard on the telecast that they said Griffin, his last 7 fights on the regional scene have all been title fights, and he's won 6 championships. Talk about a belt collector. Nate Jennerman won get closer to that LFA title, and I think they wanted a complete one-sided demolishing of John Duvall. Jennerman, a great right cross in the second round, showed off his grappling. When he was put to his back, he was able to lock in the triangle, force Duvall to submit. A good win for Jennerman, who I was very happy to talk to. Keeps moving forward. So you had some LFA action Friday night. Also, there was Bellator. Darian Caldwell will start up at the top at the main event, is able to put the pressure on Leandro Higo. When Higo tries to get up from a takedown, he leaves his neck exposed. Caldwell gets the quick submission. Bellator wants to build stars. The attitude, the style, the funk, the swag, all of that is starting to come out from the young Caldwell, the former NC State and NCAA wrestling champion. Being a finisher here in the MMA realm is very important. A good first step, defending his title, and he has a couple options still at 135 pounds. Bellator has already started to talk about, and they did on the telecast, how Caldwell is one of the bigger guys at 135 pounds, how he has desires on 145. Higo, a Pitbull protege, getting into Caldwell after the fight, getting into it with Patricio Pitbull, the 145 champion. You can see the storylines building. But in the co-main event, Joe Taiminglo, the one guy who was able to catch Caldwell on the takedown and get the guillotine submission victory, well, Taiminglo takes out former 2-division champion Joe Warren in a split decision fashion. Well, it doesn't really take him out, but gets the nod with the split decision victory. You saw Taiminglo with the cleaner striking, landing the heavier blows, not wanting to play the grappling game, stuffing the Warren takedowns, not allowing the entry. A good, solid win for Taiminglo. Not to mention making weight. It gives a big possibility here that a Taiminglo Caldwell 3 could be on the horizon. One of these smaller shows like you have here in Oklahoma, this could be a main event. A lot of good done for himself here in Joe Taiminglo. Talk about possibly earning themselves a title shot. Christina Williams takes the split decision win over Emily Ducote. I felt that this fight shouldn't have been a split decision. That is very clear-cut in the first 2 rounds. That the long striking, the straight punches, and the high kicks, finishing off all the combinations with the kicks, not starting the conversation, as they were saying, not starting the exchanges, but finishing in combinations. Christina Williams did great work in the first 2 rounds. I thought that was enough to take the unanimous decision, but in the hometown of Emily Ducote, a dominant 3rd round, somehow one judge saw all 3 rounds in her favor. Ducote got some late takedowns, needed the submission, I feel, to get the victory. Did not win it. Christina Williams has beaten Heather Hardy. She's beaten Emily Ducote. I think she's ready for Alima Lay McFarland, as we need to keep this Bellator flyweight division rolling. Juan Archuleta, dominant, just emphatically dominant, mixing up his striking to his grappling, taking down, pounding, beating up William Joplin. He's called out the Cage Warriors featherweight champion. An interesting call out from Juan Archuleta, former 4-division King of the Cage champion. Bellator, probably their most stacked division, 145 pounds, and Juan Archuleta, now that he got that debut on Paramount Network jitters out of his system into the big show of Bellator, look for a big step up in competition for the Spaniard. And as we said, it was a continual of an end still weekend, and we have a UFC event to talk about. Cyborg, simply amazing. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The top female mixed martial artist of all time. At this point, the streak that she's on, the decisiveness in what she wins. Cyborg, simply spectacular. Simply worth the money, even for the 3.5 minutes she was in action. Yana Kunitskaya on short notice, the dancing partner in this scenario of Cyborg. She was game to the point where she scored a takedown, she almost had the back, she put Cyborg against the cage, but when it came to exchanging punches, that punching power, the clean technique, the right hand, just too much for Kunitskaya to take, getting dropped, getting pounded out eventually. Cyborg calls out Amanda Nunes, and the UFC is now under the gun to make that fight happen for UFC 224. The UFC was already targeting Amanda Nunes to be in the main event of UFC 224. But the expectation would be that the Lioness would be defending against, now recovered from injury, Raquel Pennington. But with the Cyborg call-out, can you risk Pennington ruining those plans of a super fight? With the wins over Shevchenko, Tate, and Rousey, Nunes looks like the bona fide challenger at 135 pounds. Even though we've had to manufacture the Kunitskaya and the Tanya Evinger fights, a bona fide super fight here at 145 pounds, the toughest challenger we could think of outside of Megan Anderson, which I guess with, again, saying these other fights that have come together against Cyborg have not been validated. Anderson, who is the former Invicta 45 champion, it would be validated, but we haven't seen or heard of her. With the Cyborg call-out, it kind of mandates that Pennington loses her matchup versus Nunes, and Nunes, Cyborg has to be made with a card at UFC 224 that's already going to see Belfort versus Machida, Jacare versus Gastelum. I get tingles thinking about the possibility of Cyborg versus Nunes added to that. Ooh, it's a spectacular possibility of a Brazilian supercard there on pay-per-view for UFC 224. The co-main event, Brian Ortega, he deals with Frankie Edgar. Edgar doing his bouncing around, his in, his out, using his boxing, mixing it up, getting in and out, attacking beautifully, mixing in those short punches before he runs into an Ortega left elbow. Ortega, brilliant finisher. It's now 6 straight finishes. Right hand uppercut, dropping Edgar in the boxing clinch. Follow-up hammer fist caused the ref to jump in. Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, the featherweight title on the line. That's going to be such a great fight. The composure and the maturity of what Ortega was able to do in letting Frankie Edgar do what he does and still walking forward, handling it, accepting it, analyzing it, and finding his little space of daylight, finding his space to land, to connect with that elbow, and being able to do what Gray Maynard wishes he could do, and that's finishing Frankie Edgar. A huge win for Brian Ortega. People said that he had arrived when he beat Cub Swanson. People have said that you have to believe in Brian Ortega now, and I almost feel that that's short-selling the division. A division in which, with Brian Ortega, has beaten guys like Clay Guida and like Thiago Tavares. I've believed in the abilities of Brian Ortega the whole time, having went through this murderer's row of veterans to reach this pinnacle. It's such a great fight between Ortega and Holloway. Holloway, the more crisp striker with the more tools, but that elbow, the heavy-handedness, the finishing ability of Ortega is spectacular, and now it's not just that he can finish a fight in a flash on the ground, it's that he can do it on the feet also. The 145-pound division, I think there's a trickle-down effect when we look at it from this fight. Talking about Frankie Edgar losing this one, I think it puts him in position for Edgar to have a matchup with a guy that we haven't seen him fight before. I think it'd be interesting if we took on Ricardo Lamas. That also, I think, makes that this matchup needs to be mentioned too, real quick. Cub Swanson, Jose Aldo, that fight should happen. Jeremy Stevens, coming off a big win. It's 3 in a row. Darren Elkins has won 6 in a row. I think Elkins deserves the ability to win his 7th, to get a huge momentum swing and take on a name like Stevens, as Stevens has been able to make himself into such a name with these knockout victories. UFC 222 also saw the Sugar Show. Sugar Sean O'Malley showed off diverse striking, a long kicking game, a right hand that was landing, 2 rounds of dynamic striking, a 10-8 second round until a head kick in the third round leads to injury. O'Malley hopping around on one foot, and Andrei Sukumov with a blunder goes for the takedown. Sukumov should have, with the takedown, put his pressure on that foot, went for a leg lock, grabbed the foot stomp, knee stomp, something malicious, almost an intent, but giving O'Malley the ability to just grapple saved O'Malley to the bell. Sukumov had victory in his hands, down on the card. Could have won. He just needed to back away, make O'Malley stand. Who knows if he could have walked towards him like the ref would have demanded. Victory was so close, but O'Malley really did earn in the first 2 rounds. Andrei Arlovski takes away the front leg of Stefan Struve in the first round, is able to mix in some nice overhands, gets takedowns, and survives in the second round being under Struve, which I thought would have been the undoing of Arlovski, that he was going to end up in that position to secure a victory. You cannot count the pit bull down. Caitlin Vieira keeps rolling, taking a split decision victory over Kat Zingano that shouldn't have been a split decision. The first round, the striking was kind of close, but Vieira ended the first round with a takedown. The second round, Vieira was doing very well on top. Yes, Zingano had a very good third round, but it should have been unanimous for Vieira. The Brazilian is unheralded, but I think with the win streak she's on, now coming off her second big name, having beaten McMahon, having beaten Zingano, this could potentially now make a matchup for number 1 contendership with Raquel Pennington because of that Cyborg call out. Prior to the Cyborg call out, I thought Marion Renault versus Caitlin Vieira, a number 1 contendership at 135, would make sense considering that you would think Pennington would be facing Nunes. But with the thought of Cyborg Nunes, I think that means Pennington should have to fight Vieira. The women's bantamweight division, a little bit of moving and shaking. The FS1 prelims were capped off with Mackenzie Dern getting a split decision win over Ashley Yoder. Dern did some good things, kept the striking close enough, even though it wasn't clean striking, to steal one of the early first 2 rounds. Also did a nice job of pushing Yoder against the fence in the first round. The third round, Dern definitely won that round, getting the takedown, having the back, and almost getting the submission, having the grappling advantage, the positional advantage in the last 90 seconds. Yoder scored a knockdown in the second round. I really thought she won the first 2 rounds. Hard one to swallow for Yoder. Dern, the UFC hype train, can breathe a breath of fresh air as she picked up that split decision win, but it is, you got to respect the way that Mackenzie Dern, a grappling specialist, is willing to work on her striking in live competition at such a high level. We saw Ronda Rousey, one of her undoings now that you can reflect on is that she really used her grappling advantage when it was there and didn't take the time to work on her striking to the point where we saw the flaws exposed when she got to the highest level of strikers. Dern mixing it up now with a striker that's better than her and working on those in live competition is a very good thought process for improvement, and I like to see that mentality. Dern swung with intentions and everything and can only move on from here. Alexander Hernandez, short notice, everybody thought, well, Beneil Dariush will probably win this fight. Hernandez, young, athletic, explosive, 42 seconds, a left straight down the pipe that takes out the formerly 12th-ranked contender. The lightweight division so stacked with talent, we always talk about it, and there will be a new contender now. Alexander Hernandez. John Dodson takes a decision victory over Pedro Munoz. The left hand was working. Dodson moved Munoz around. Dodson finally finds himself on the right side of a decision after the last couple were hard to swallow. A good all-around effort from the magician. The left leg, the left knee. John Dodson from here, I'm not sure if he gets one of those top contenders, but you got to look back and think he's knocked out TJ Dillashaw and been in close wars with Marlon Moraes and John Lineker, keeping himself right there in the mix in that top 6 or 7 of the bantamweight division. The night opened up with controversy. Hector Lombard was catching the kick, that body kick that CB Dollaway was continually throwing. The left hand lands after the bell to the right side of the chin of Dollaway. It's a concussive blow. Dollaway is not allowed to continue because it's a concussive blow that was landed after the bell. The fight is called a disqualification and a win for CB Dollaway, who was using his kicks, using a quantity of striking, moving in and out, and was having a good first round against Hector Lombard. But we know with Lombard, he sits back, he waits to explode, land one big shot. Lombard's bad, obviously an infraction, obviously heinous that he landed the big shot outside of the bell. CB Dollaway, not the way you want to return. Mike Pyle in his last fight unfortunately goes out with a loss. Zach Ottawa landed the big shot, followed it up with ground and pound, and gets Pyle out of the octagon in his retirement fight in a half a round. Cody Stamann picks up the biggest win of his young career with a split decision over number 7 ranked bantamweight contender Brian Caraway. Maybe Cody Stamann with a huge win like that gets an opportunity at a veteran like John Dodson. Caraway had a very good round 1, putting the fight in grappling positions and controlling Stamann. After that, for the second and third, Stamann landed big strikes and anti-grappled on his way to getting the decision victory. Jordan Johnson was able to put his grappling game and a strong jab into place in the first 2 rounds of his fight. Well, Adam Milstead with a strong third round, but not strong enough to get the decision victory to kick off the night. Cyborg was impressive. Deontay Wilder dug down and deep. Darian Caldwell, ultra impressive in submitting Leandro Higo. Robert Watley needs LASIK surgery. But in all, it was an end still kind of weekend. News from Bellator is that Mirko Krokop versus Roy Big Country Nelson has been added to the London Bellator 200 card that includes David Rickles versus MVP and the middleweight title being on the line, Gegard Mousasi challenging Rafael Calvaro. This weekend, there's one MMA event on tap. LFA is in Houston, Texas. LFA 35, the return of former XFC champion Nick Newell, impressive submission artist whose one lone career MMA loss came in WSOF against Justin Gaethje, taking on Sonny Luque, another finisher of 6 of his 10 wins by stoppage. Top prospects Jason Lanier, not to mention Access TV vet Charles Cheeks, Adrian Yanez, expected to be on the card. The co-main event right now is what I'm seeing. Jared Veneer and Vernon Lewis, a heavyweight contest that will not last long. That's what's going on Friday night. Not a busy weekend of MMA coming up this weekend. And as for me, this was just a quick little show this week. Thanks for tuning in. And one more time, a shout out to Mac10. If you don't, also check out Red Menace TV on ProView Network's a part of that show every week as well. Thanks for listening.